The first crack of dawn stretched thin over the barren desert, casting long shadows across the weathered wooden porch where the man sat, breaking his bread in silence. His eyes caught the faint outline of a figure staggering through the haze, a lone Apache warrior, gaunt and weary, skin stretched taut over ribs like the canvas of a worn saddle. Without hesitation, the man rose, tore a piece from his loaf, and held it out, despite the gnawing fear buried deep beneath his calm exterior. In that quiet moment, beneath a sky bruised with pale light, charity defied the bitterness of the frontier. The farm lay stranded miles from the nearest settlement, a solitary outpost clinging to life amid endless sweeps of cracked earth and scrub brush. The scent of dry dust hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint trace of sage and the distant caw of a wary crow. Wind whispered through dead tumbleweeds, stirring the rims of rusted barrels and shifting loose soil beneath tired boots. At night, the desert's silent expanse wrapped itself around the land like a shroud. At dawn, it seemed to hold its breath, wary and watchful. Inside his weather-beaten chest, the man wrestled with the trembling knotted threads of compassion and caution. Years carving survival from this ruthless land had taught him to guard his generosity as fiercely as his rifle. But something in the hollow stare of the Apache, an echo of exhaustion deeper than hunger, a flicker of pride amid suffering, pulled at his heart with a force stubborn and true. To offer bread was to risk not just his own safety, but the fragile trust of neighbors, quick to judge and quicker still to strike. The Apache warrior lowered himself to the ground with a quiet grace, born of fatigue and restraint, eyes wary but accepting. His fingers closed around the ruddy crust with an almost sacred reverence, trembling with the hunger of days without. His chest heaved, breath shallow and ragged, yet in the stolen moments beneath the sprawling sky, a fragile peace glanced between them, wordless, tentative, yet charged with an unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity could find a thread of common ground here. But the desert holds its secrets close, and beneath this fragile truce lingered the weight of 1,000 unspoken warnings. Neighboring settlers had sneered at the man's kindness, whispering of betrayal and curses that followed those who befriended the enemy. Across the barren plains, the Apache tribe lived shadowed by grievances old as the dust itself. Each gesture carefully read, each act measured for meaning. The man's heart beat in synchronous tension with the looming unknown. Would this gesture of goodwill be seen as a beacon of peace or a provocation carved with deadly intent? As twilight wrapped the farm in hushed darkness, the two men sat apart beneath the skeletal limbs of a lone mesquite, sharing nothing but the silence and the uncertainty it bore. Eyes met in fleeting flashes, fragile bridges built with neither words nor promises, but with quiet understanding wrought from shared hardships. The wind carried the scent of smoke and distant danger, while night creatures bored their songs of warning into the stillness. The farm seemed to hold its breath, the thin line between refuge and peril stretched razor-sharp. When the pale light returned, it brought with it a horror sharp as the desert cold. The man's discovery was immediate and cruel. A dozen arrows, their shafts bloodied but deliberate, embedded deep into the rickety fence that guarded his small plot of earth. The symbols of a silent threat, a message etched in pain and defiance, rooted like thorns in his fragile hope. His hands trembled, tracing the cruel marks in disbelief, heart pounding with fear and fierce resolve. The land he nurtured and the act of mercy he had dared were now entangled in a peril that no bread alone could soothe. Many a traveler on these dusty trails has told us how fate, or that tricky YouTube algorithm, sometimes strips away their subscriptions without warning. Before the next dangerous turn reveals itself and new twists unfold, take a quick moment below the video to make sure you're still signed up with our band. Don't lose the thread of this unfolding saga in the wild lands. Check your subscription now and join us for what's to come. The arrows embedded in the fence whispered a silent menace, their bloodied shafts an unmistakable covenant of danger. The man's gaze lingered on the crude marks, each one a razor pressed against his fragile hope. His fingers traced the splintered wood, hands trembling, not just from fear, but from the fierce resolve hardening in his chest. If mercy was a gamble, then he had just been dealt a hand soaked in warning. The Apache warrior stirred beside him, the worn lines on his face deepening as he surveyed. The arrows, his eyes sharp and unreadable, flickered toward the horizon where shadows began to grow heavy against the settling dusk. There was no need for words. The slightest tilt of his head spoke volumes. Danger was closing in, closer than the man had dared to admit, and the silence of the desert concealed enemies with cold patience. Together, they moved toward the fence, their steps careful and deliberate on the brittle earth. The man's hand rested briefly on the familiar worn grip of his rifle before lingering on the warrior's tensed posture instead. In that stillness, between the creak of weather-worn wood and the distant cry of a lone coyote, a hesitant trust wove itself tighter, fragile yet defiant. Night draped the land quickly, a black velvet curtain pierced by silver stars. But the farm was no sanctuary. Shadows danced with whispered threats. The man hurried to barricade the gate, heart pounding a relentless drumbeat that echoed the wild pulse of the desert night. His breath came sharp in the chill air, mingling with the subtle aroma of burning cedar from a small fire they dared to keep alive, a flickering defiance against the engulfing darkness. The Apache settled near the blaze, body hunched in a weary sprawl that belied a coiled strength. His eyes reflected the flames, flickering with memories, ghosts of battles fought beneath endless skies, of stolen children and broken treaties, of survival written in blood and dust. Yet for all the weight borne by his shoulders, the brief moment of shared warmth drew a slender thread of solace between the two estranged souls. The man broke the silence first, his voice low and gravelly. "They won't come alone," he said, eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Not after what you did, helping my kin. Reckon they'll send more than words this time." The warrior's jaw tightened, lips a thin line of resolve. They hunt, expecting blood, but they do not see what burns within us. Fire that neither bullet nor arrow can douse. A grim nod answered him. That fire's got to be stronger than their hatred. For our sake. Thunder rumbled distant and faint, a mournful cadence rolling over barren hills. The wind carried it as both warning and promise, as if the very earth held its breath for what was to come. Between the bone-weary desperation and creeping dread, a quiet determination solidified. To defend this fragile alliance, whether friend or foe challenged it. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the stillness. The man whirled, rifle raised instinctively, eyes searching the black horizon. A shape slipped through mesquite shadows, a scout, pale-faced and panting, clutching a bloodied cloth. "They're closer than you think," the youth gasped, voice ragged. "The patrols found your trail. They're approaching fast, and they bring reinforcements." The Apache's expression tightened, muscles coiling like a spring set to snap. "Then we no longer wait. They must not reach this place." The man swallowed hard, the weight of the land and the moment pressing down, like the desert sun at high noon. "If they come for you, then they come for me," he said quietly. "We stand together for what little peace this forsaken ground might hold." A sudden howl rent the night, a mournful, primal keening that twisted like a blade through the hush. The wind seemed to carry it from the far reaches of the canyon, where enemy eyes surely gleamed hungrily in the dark. The warrior's gaze hardened, fiery embers sparking behind his weary eyes. Then there is no turning back. A tense silence stretched between them, taut as a drawn bowstring, each moment loaded with everything unspoken: fear, hope, resentment, and something fragile, a mutual understanding forged in desperation. The man's hand settled on the warrior's shoulder, rough and steady, a silent vow passed between flesh and bone. "We'll face the dawn together, not as enemy or stranger, but as men bound by more than blood, the will to survive." From the depths of the night, a sudden flicker of movement caught the man's eye. Just beyond the fence, a shadow slipped with unnatural silence. His breath. Hitched as realization dawned, they were no longer alone. Eyes glinted like cold fire, waiting, watching. The hunt had truly begun. And then, from the darkness, a chilling voice sliced through the silence. "You thought mercy could save you? Out here, kindness is a wound that bleeds deep." The man's grip tightened. Danger had crossed the threshold, and the fragile thread of their uneasy truce was about to be tested by a storm darker and deadlier than either had yet faced. A shadow loomed just beyond the fence, its outline blurred by the night's faint pulse. The man's breath caught, rifle steady, yet fingers restless. The voice, cold and sharp as desert glass, had shattered the fragile calm like a stone tossed into still water. No more illusions. Kindness was a wound, and theirs was bleeding raw. The Apache warrior rose slowly, muscles taut beneath worn leather, eyes narrowed like the narrowest slits of moonlight slicing through the dark. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, as the two men exchanged a glance loaded with more than words could bear. This confrontation was inevitable now. The figure beyond the fence stepped forward, a silhouette sharp and familiar to the man. It was the leader of the settler patrol, a man whose reputation for ruthless justice shadowed every mile of these unforgiving lands. His eyes gleamed with a bitter fire, swallowing the light of the dying embers. "You protect your friend well," the patrol leader said, voice gravel rough and edged with scorn. "But mercy breeds weakness, and out here, weakness dies fast." The man's jaw tightened. "There's no kindness left in your words, only threat." The Apache's hand moved subtly toward the dagger at his belt, a gesture cloaked in tense warning. "Your hatred blinds you. We are not enemies by choice." A harsh laugh cracked through the air, brittle as dry wood snapping. "Enemies by blood," spat the leader. "And I won't let your wishes rewrite that. Leave this place or prepare for the consequences." The man stepped forward, the weight of years bearing down with each deliberate move. "I won't abandon someone who trusted the gift of bread." "Not now." The dark watcher beyond the fence paused, shadows flickering across his face in a grim dance, just as a sudden rustling stirred the sparse brush nearby. Movement jagged and quick. A second figure darted from the gloom, a scout from the patrol, eyes wild with urgency. He hissed a warning that barely breached. "The night's heavy veil. They circle us, more than you'd guess. This isn't just a warning anymore. They come with intent to destroy. You and the one you shield." The Apache's eyes sharpened, breath tightening into a slow rhythm as ancient instincts surfaced beneath exhaustion. "So it has come to this. We face the storm or be swallowed by it." The man swung his rifle upward, the barrel catching a sliver of moonlight as tension coiled like a rattlesnake poised to strike. Time fractured into piercing moments. The cold desert air sang a low dirge, carrying the distant howl of coyotes and the thudding pulse of dread. "This land holds no sanctuaries," the man whispered, voice rough with bitter resolve. "Only survivors." The warrior nodded, shadows deepening the creases of a face etched by countless battles. Yet, even in the harshest wasteland, a spark can endure. Together, they circled the small fire again, their shadows dancing wild and fractured, casting twins of defiance against a world that sought to tear them apart. The night thickened, pressing close like a warning, every crack of dry twig echoing like a gunshot in the stunned stillness. Hours ebbed with slow cruelty before the silence broke. Soft footsteps crept at the fence's edge. Figures moved in ghostly patterns. Patrol advance scouts, bent on eroding the fragile refuge the pair had carved. The man felt the cold slide of fear lap at his pulse, a freezing reminder. Mercy had marked them both for peril. The Apache reached into the flames, retrieving a small sharpened stone. With careful, deliberate strokes, he began etching a symbol into the dirt, a silent prayer and promise, wrapped in an ancient language of warriors and survivors. The man crouched beside him, chest tight yet steady. "This is our ground, and we will not fall silent." Dawn still hours away, the desert held its breath, but the first flicker of light beyond the hills promised a reckoning. Both men understood the fragile alliance they'd forged would be tested by fire and blood. The question now was what would survive the coming storm, fear or hope? Just then, a sudden thud echoed, a heavy knock at the battered wooden gate. Both heads snapped toward the sound, senses sharp as knives. The man's heart surged with a desperate thrum. Had the patrol arrived? Or had an even darker shadow slipped through the desert's endless veil? The Apache's steel eyes caught the man's, a warning, and a challenge wrapped in one hard gaze. Open or stand your ground. Before the man could answer, the knock came again, this time followed by a low, chilling voice that froze the blood in his veins. The desert doesn't forgive fools, and those who harbor its enemies invite death itself. Time tilted, and in that suspended heartbeat, the man made his choice. The gate creaked open, just enough for a figure to slip inside. A slim silhouette, veiled in dust and dusk, carrying a message sealed with desperation and a secret that threatened to shatter every thread of fragile trust they'd woven. The wind carried the words, half-whispered and heavy. They come not just for the Apache, but for all of us who dare to defy the desert's wrath. A sharpened howl split the horizon, a signal from the enemy's vanguard, close enough to swallow the night whole. The man's hand gripped his rifle with a fierce finality. The Apache's dagger gleamed cold, steady as the unyielding desert stars. And beneath the trembling sky, the first shot rang out, marking the true beginning of their fight for survival, and the unraveling of a truth more perilous than any arrow or bullet ever could be. The night thickened like a closing trap, swallowing the fragile silence that once held the farm in hesitant peace. The man's hand tightened around the rifle, knuckles whitening beneath the rough leather strap. His breath came shallow, each inhale pierced by the icy sting of uncertainty. Beyond the fence, the shadows stirred again, restless and waiting, as if the desert itself had turned to watch the unfolding reckoning. The Apache warrior rose, his movements fluid, despite the weariness etched deep into his bones. His eyes, sharp as fractured moonlight, searched the darkness beyond the gate, where the faintest shift of movement betrayed unseen watchers. The man caught the subtle tension coiling in the warrior's shoulders, a silent signal they both understood. No word was needed. The truce, forged from hunger and desperation, was on the brink of fracture. "They gather like vultures," the man whispered, voice husky and tight, waiting for the moment to strike, to rip apart what little hope we hold. His gaze traveled along the fence, lingering on the blood-stained arrow shafts, crude warnings that burned hotter now in the chill of night. The Apache's jaw clenched. Mercy is a fragile flame in these lands. One wrong breath, and it snuffs out, leaving only ashes for the unforgiving. Wind. His voice trembled, then steadied, a low growl born of memories too deep to share aloud. Minutes passed like drawn knives, each sound amplified by the desert's eerie quiet. A rustle of dry leaves, the snap of a brittle branch, the faint echo of restless coyotes, each a drumbeat in a gathering storm. The man moved silently to the door of the shack, eyes scanning for anything that could serve as a barrier, a trap, some shield against the coming onslaught. "We won't last long if they break through," he muttered under his breath, his fingers ghosting over the cold metal of an old hunting knife. They want more than warnings now. Revenge drives them. Beside him, the Apache knelt near the fire, eyes fixed on the flickering embers, as if drawing strength from the flames. Stubborn defiance. "Our fight is no longer just for survival," he said softly, "but for the very soul of this land. They see me as a ghost, a shadow to cast down, but I am still here, still alive, and I will not vanish." A sharp cry cut through the night, a warning drawn from a throat taut with fear. The man and the warrior snapped their heads toward the sound. One of the patrol's scouts, no doubt, circling too close, testing the edges of their fragile sanctuary. The man's grip on his rifle tightened until the wood dug bruises into his palms. "Quiet," hissed the Apache, voice barely above the sigh of the desert wind. "They listen for fear. We give them none." The man swallowed hard and nodded, lowering his weapon slightly, but never losing his readiness. His eyes met the warrior's, sharing a deadly understanding, forged in countless trials. The night was a battlefield, and every heartbeat could be the last. A sudden scraping noise on the far side of the fence drew their attention. A limb snagging against wood, a stealthy advance masked by the scrub brush and moon's pale gleam. The patrol leader had come, bringing with him the cold certainty of unforgiving justice. No compromise existed in his world. "Your kindness breeds weakness." The man heard the voice from the dark, gravelly, venomous, the sound of a man who'd lived only by the barrel of a gun and ruled by fear. There is no mercy in the borderlands, only law and its reckoning. The Apache stepped forward, dagger drawn in a fluid motion honed by years of quiet danger. His stance was calm but resolute, the strength of his tribe coursing fiercely beneath his scarred skin. "Mercy is not weakness," he replied, voice steady and defiant. "It is the spark that lights the darkness, something you and your kind have forgotten." The patrol leader's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Sentiment is for the dead and the forgiving. Out here, only the strong survive. You can either run or die trying." The man's gaze hardened. "He is under my protection. As long as I breathe, they will not touch him." His words carried the weight of every lonely dawn and every hard-fought day etched into the land he defended. From the shadows, more figures shifted, scouts closing in, their eyes glinting with the cold hunger of retribution. The fence, their fragile barrier, seemed suddenly too thin, too frail, against the tide of vengeance, gathering like a dark storm ready to break. The Apache turned toward the man, voice low but urgent. "We cannot hold them forever. We need a plan, a way to fight back, or this place will become another lost grave." The man's mind raced, calculating the impossible odds, weighing every risk. "There's a narrow path behind the ridge," he said at last. "If we can hold them long enough, maybe we slip away, find the others, build a stronger band to stand when the fire comes." The warrior considered the offer, muscles tensing then relaxing. Escape is wisdom, but leaving the land unclaimed is surrender. We must choose which death we face. A long silence stretched between them, charged and heavy. The desert night felt alive, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Suddenly, a dull thud shook the gate, the first blow of what promised to be a relentless assault. The man stepped forward, voice steady and fierce. "Hold fast. For every inch, they'll pay in blood." From the darkness beyond, a whispered threat broke the tension, an ominous voice laced with chilling certainty. "This land belongs to no one who hides behind a stranger's mercy. You'll burn for your sins." The Apache's eyes flickered with ancient fire. "Then we will meet fire with fire." As the gate creaked under the weight of relentless pounding, the man glanced once more at the warrior's steady form. In that shared look, they exchanged a vow stronger than any bullet or blade. They would endure, together. And as the first embers of dawn bled pale and cold over the horizon, a new flicker of movement caught the man's eye. A figure slipping silently through the shadows, carrying with them a desperate message and a dark secret that would fracture everything they fought to protect. The silent desert held its breath. Then came the whispered words, barely more than a breath. "Not all the enemy rides with guns. Some wear the faces of friends." The night pressed heavy and unyielding down upon the farmstead. The darkness, thick as a spider's web, spun tight against the trembling embers still flickering in the cold fire pit. The man's grip on his rifle was iron. Fingers white as the ancient wood groaned beneath the relentless pounding at the gate. Each knock echoed like a hammer on a tombstone, promising nothing but the final rending of fragile peace. The Apache warrior's eyes scanned the shadows beyond. Depths lit faintly by a sliver of moon, so thin it might have been a cracked blade. His muscles coiled beneath worn leather, silent and ready, every breath a slow, measured storm. Neither man needed words. Their silence already spoke of the deadly stakes binding them tightly, a chain forged not by friendship, but by necessity and a shared will to survive. Outside, the wind stirred, carrying whispers of movement, the scuff of desperation, the rustle of creeping boots, whispers of hatred, circling like wolves sizing prey. The man's mind wove through possibilities with sharp urgency, calculating moments, knowing the thin barrier of fence and gunfire would not hold forever. A sudden shifting caught his eye, shadows moving like ghosts amongst the mesquite, and the cold realization fell like a stone in his gut. The enemy wasn't merely circling anymore. They had crossed the threshold from threat to siege. A voice rasped, low and cruel from the darkness beyond the gate. "Your mercy was never a shield. It's an invitation for an end none of you deserve." The tone carried the venom of 1,000 grudges and the cold certainty of brutal justice, long forgotten by the laws of men. The man stepped forward, his voice steady, though his heart hammered wild beneath his battered coat. "This land, this moment, it's ours to hold, however briefly. We won't break before hell tries." Beside him, the warrior's eyes burned harsher, rain-washed memories flickering behind their steely glaze, of lost kin, broken promises, and wars carved in blood. "We do not seek your pardon, only our place beneath this merciless sky." The gate shuddered dangerously as another blow struck, splinters flying like shards of broken dreams. The man's fingers itched with the familiar weight of his rifle stock, while his free hand pressed firmly onto the warrior's shoulder. An unspoken vow, a tether against the looming abyss. Suddenly, a faint gasp, sharp, carried on the night wind, broke through the tension. From the shadows stepped a figure, stumbling, clutching a tattered piece of cloth, soaked with urgency and something darker. A warning. "They're closer than the ghosts of your hope," the youth gasped, voice ragged and trembling. "The patrol's vanguard. They bring more than hatred. They come with fire and death." The Apache's gaze narrowed, muscles tensing like braided steel. "Then time is a luxury we cannot afford. The storm comes. We meet it head on." The man swallowed the bitter taste of fear, biting down hard to mold it into resolve. "If they come for you, they come for me. We stand as one. No surrender, no retreat." Shadows lengthened and twisted, weaving themselves into a living threat. A hollow howl split the stillness, a raw, anguished cry that clawed the tense air, ushering in the first raindrops of violence to come. The warrior crouched beside the fire, hands gripping a sharpened stone with deliberate steadiness. With slow care, he traced ancient symbols into the dust. A prayer, a shield, and a promise all in one. The man crouched beside him, heart-pounding drums of defiance beneath his ribs. "Whatever comes," the Apache murmured, voice iron beneath weary bones. "This ground remembers those who dared to stand." But the night was a cruel host, merciless and cunning. Suddenly, with a swiftness that scraped breath from their throats, figures emerged from the darkness. Patrol scouts slipping like shadows between mesquite, eyes glinting colder than the teeth of coyotes. The fragile sanctuary was shattered. The hunt had fully begun. The man steadied his breath, raising his rifle as the first unmistakable whispers of gunmetal kissed the midnight air. The warrior's blade gleamed steady, a blade drawn not just for survival, but in remembrance of a past too mournful to abandon. Then, like a tolling bell over the barren plains, a voice rose again from the darkness, sharp, biting like desert thorns. "You thought your mercy a shield? It is a wound bleeding the last lifeblood from this forgotten land." The man's eyes locked with the Apache's. Between them, a silent command. There was no turning back, not from the enemy, not from the ghosts within. A sudden pulse of movement caught the man's eye. Near the broken fence post, a shadow rippled, slow, deliberate, carrying with it a presence, neither friend nor yet declared foe. From the folds of dust and night stepped a figure veiled in dusk and secrets, clutching something wrapped tight and whispered in desperate breath. The man's voice dropped to a grim whisper, threading the darkness with warning and dread. Not all the enemy rides under the same banner. Some wear the faces of friends. A sharp crack of rifle fire exploded, singing through the night like a death knell, and the battle for their souls, their land, was no longer a distant storm, but a raging inferno engulfing everything they dared to hold dear. The sharp knock came again, a hollow echo against the battered gate that groaned under the assault. The man's grip tightened on his rifle, breath shallow and steady, his senses stretched taut like the bowstring of a poised arrow. Beyond the fence, the night held its cold, merciless watch, a silent witness to the fragile moment where mercy and danger intertwined. The Apache warrior stood beside him, a shadow coiled in quiet strength. The flickering firelight traced the worn lines on his face, a map of battles fought in silence, in blood, in dust. His eyes remained fixed on the darkness beyond, where faint shapes shifted like restless spirits. Neither spoke, the weight of unspoken words binding them tighter than any oath. Suddenly, a figure slipped through the gap they had barely allowed, a silhouette veiled in the cloak of desperation. Dust clung to his shoulders, and his eyes burned with a frantic urgency that pierced the night's grim quiet. He collapsed to the ground, gasping words between ragged breaths. "They come faster than the last whisper of the wind," he warned, voice cracked and raw. "A full company of mounted men. They ride hard, and they bring no mercy for either of you." The man's heart hammered beneath the rough fabric of his shirt, a wild drumbeat of fear and resolve. He exchanged a glance with the warrior, a flash of grim understanding. The fragile thread of their alliance now faced a storm beyond anything they had yet imagined. "Then we face them as one," the Apache said softly, voice low but ironclad. "Their hatred runs deep, but so does the fire within us." The man nodded, the rugged determination settling over him like a second skin. "We fight, or we fade into the dust like ghosts forgotten by the wind." A moment of silence stretched, broken only by the distant howling of coyotes, a mournful chorus that seemed to mourn the coming violence. The night held tight to its secrets, but the coming dawn promised no peace. From the shadows, faint but deliberate sounds rippled through the mesquite, boots treading over dry soil, whispering like the breath of an unseen gathering storm. The man moved to the gate, setting his rifle to lean against the splintered wood while gripping the iron latch, ready to meet whatever awaited beyond. "You are the only hope this desolate place knows," he told the Apache, voice rough but steady. "They will not find us weak." The warrior's eyes softened for the briefest moment, a flicker of gratitude hidden beneath the wariness. "Hope is a fragile thing here, a candle flickering against the desert gale." The man took a slow breath, eyes scanning the horizon where black clouds gathered, heavy with menace. "Then will be the wind that shields it." Night deepened, and with it, the senses sharpened into something primal. The man's ears caught a faint shuffle to the left, a movement almost too soft for mortal hearing. Instinctively, he raised his rifle to the small opening and narrowed his eyes through the gloom. A pair of cold eyes met his. A scout, pressed close to the earth, clutching a bundle wrapped tightly in oilcloth. The figure's breath came in harsh gasps, body trembling but determined. "They're not just coming with guns," the scout hissed. "There's talk among them of a traitor, a shadow in the night who walks with you. They mean to root out all who harbor the Apache, including those too blind to see their own betrayal." The man's heart sank. The whisper of betrayal, an echo heavy as the desert sun at its zenith. Trust, once so scarce, now seemed more fragile than ever. The Apache's brow furrowed, chest rising with a slow, deliberate breath. "Then our enemy rides within. We fight not only the hate in their hearts, but the poison in their midst. The man's jaw clenched as the first distant hooves punctured the silent black, steady and fast, like thunder rolling over the hills. The patrol advanced, as inevitable and merciless as winter's cold bite. "We prepare," the man said quietly, a fierce resolve threading through his words. "We do not wait for death to decide our fate." They worked quickly, barricading the gate with rusted tools and broken boards, stacking stones where loose earth gave way. Every motion purposeful and urgent. The fire guttered low under the night wind's growing howl. But it remained, an ember of defiance, poised against the looming dark. The APACHE crouched beside the man once more, hands tracing symbols in the dust. A silent invocation from a time before blood spilled and treaties broke. His voice was a whisper barely heard before the next assault. "We hold this ground, not just with guns or steel, but with the legacy of our people. This land remembers those who dared set foot before us." A sudden, brutal crash tore through the darkness. The gate shuddered beneath the weight of the enemy's first battering blow. The man stepped back, rifle raised, eyes alight with cold fire. "Here," he growled. Voice breaking through the tension like a thunderclap. "Here, we make our stand." The pounding grew relentless now, a storm of wood and iron, hate and desperation clashing against the fragile fortress of hope they'd built. And then, from the center of that furious symphony, a voice cut through, sharp and chilling. "Your kindness is a blade turned against your own hearts. We will burn every last trace of it to ash." The APACHE's eyes blazed. Steel, flashing beneath the weight of ancient grief and unyielding will. "Then let the ashes be witness to our fight." Through the shifting shadows, the man caught a desperate glimpse, a figure retreating from the fence line, clutching the torn fabric of a cloak stained with something darker than dust. A secret carried like a curse, whispered on the wind. He stepped forward, voice raw and steady in the face of the coming nightmare. "This fight is no longer ours alone." The night shattered as a single shot pierced the air, sharp, cruel, and the dance of survival began anew beneath the desolate desert stars. But before the echo faded, a new terror blossomed in the silence. The slow, deliberate presence at the edge of the firelight. From the darkness emerged a face both known and feared, eyes glinting with betrayal's cold flame. The man's blood ran ice cold. "You did not hear the truth whispered in the dust," the figure sneered. "Not all the enemy rides with guns. Some wear the faces of those you call brother." The fragile alliance teetered on the edge of a knife, and the night's cruelest secret threatened to unravel everything they had dared to build. The moon vanished behind a cloud, plunging the land into utter darkness. And then, silent but certain, footsteps approached from behind. The gate creaked as the figure slipped silently inside, the night swallowing his form almost as quickly as it appeared. Dust clung to his tattered cloak, and eyes wide with urgent desperation scanned the small clearing where the man and the APACHE warrior stood, braced for what was to come. Breath ragged, the newcomer barely managed a whisper. "They're closer." led by more than just hatred now. There's a shadow within their ranks, a traitor who walks among us, feeding their fire from the inside. A cold shiver traced the man's spine as the weight of those words settled. Enemy not only at their doorstep, but already inside their fragile circle. His gaze locked with the Apache's. Fierce, unreadable eyes. Neither needed more explanation. The bitter truth fell between them like desert stones, grinding relentlessly. From beyond the fence came the low rumble of horses' hooves, the heavy beat echoing through the desert night like a gathering storm. The man raised his rifle, steady despite the burning fire of anxiety beneath his skin. The warrior's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his dagger, fingers flexing with silent readiness. "We cannot wait for death's slow approach," the warrior said, voice low and steady. "We must meet the coming storm head-on, even if it devours us whole." The man drew a deep, shuddering breath, muscles coiling with resolve. If they come for him, they come for me. No turning back. His hand gripped the worn stock of his rifle, knuckles pale in the moonlight. Around them, the desert held its breath. The warm scent of sage was tangled with the harsher odors of sweat and fear. The fire flickered between them, fragile but unyielding. For a moment, only the whisper of the wind dared to break the tension. Suddenly, a series of sharp cracks split the silence. Shadows darted among the mesquite, figures dark and swift, moving with lethal purpose. Scouts of the patrol closing in, testing the resolve of the outpost. Each step, each breath was a signal, a countdown to the violence tightening around their fragile peace. The man crouched beside the warrior, eyes narrowing, breath drawing shallow but controlled. The Apache scraped a glowing stone against the earth, tracing lines of an ancient symbol into the dust, a silent prayer in the language of the land and survival. The man's fingers dug into the dry ground, a subtle mirror of that desperate defiance. "They believe mercy is weakness," the warrior murmured, voice pressing into the cool night air. "But they forget. The strongest flame burns brightest in the darkest night." A sudden howl split the horizon, a raw, mourning cry echoing through the canyons. The man's heart clenched. It was no ordinary coyote, something primal and mournful, a herald of the storm to come. "More are coming," the man whispered, eyes glistening with bitter clarity. "We hold as long as we can, then run if we must." The warrior shook his head slowly, the flicker of flame dancing light and shadow across his worn face. "This land is not just earth beneath our feet, it's memory, blood, and fight. To flee is to lose more than ground." The man lifted his rifle, finger tightening over the trigger as the first shadows took form, creeping closer. "Then we fight for every inch, every breath, every shred of hope we steal from this unforgiving land." A heavy thud crashed against the gate. The enemy's assault had begun in earnest. Splinters flew as wood cracked, a brutal rhythm signaling the end of peace. Stepped into the barrier, rifle raised in trembling defiance. From darkness, a harsh and bitter voice slithered through the air. "Your kindness is a wound, one we will cut out with fire and blood." The Apache's eyes burned like molten steel. Then let the ashes tell the tale of those who never bowed. Suddenly, movement flickered near a broken fence post. A figure cloaked in dusk crept closer, shoulders hunched under the weight of a secret, wrapped tight in oilcloth. The man's gaze hardened as the figure approached, breath caught beneath the shroud of night. Whispers floated just above the crackle of flames, heavy with warning. Not all enemies bear guns. Some wear the faces of friends. Time seemed to splinter. The man's heart thudded wildly as a single rifle shot shattered the air. A stark herald of battle unleashed, the warrior's dagger gleamed, poised and unflinching. Darkness closed in, swallowing the farmstead in a suffocating wave. Then, just beyond the firelight's reach, a slow, deliberate step advanced. A presence neither fully seen nor truly known, weighted with betrayal's cold breath. Eyes that had once drawn strength from the land now glittered with a venomous truth. You did not hear the warnings whispered in dust. Enemy rides not only with guns, but masked as brother. The fragile trust, the unsteady hope that stitched two strangers into allies, trembled like a flame set loose in the wind. And in that moment, a figure's hand reached out, not with greeting, but with the unyielding grip of death. The gate creaked under the weight of relentless knocks, each blow a hammer against the brittle barrier between fragile hope and looming ruin. The man's fingers tightened around his rifle as the shadow slipped quietly through the narrow gap, silent as dust disturbed by a restless wind. His eyes caught the figure's desperate glare, wide and burning with urgency. Words tumbled from shattered lips. They're coming. A full company rides hard. No mercy this time. And there's a traitor among them, walking the night with your shadow. The poison of betrayal sank like ice into the man's veins. His gaze locked with the Apache's, fierce and unreadable beneath the flickering firelight. No more illusions lingered in the dark. The enemy was not only at their threshold, but already weaving threads of ruin from within. Beyond the fence, rhythmic pounding grew, the iron heartbeat of hooves and mounted men rolling in like thunder across brittle earth. Yet silence held firm between the two men, breath slow, but heavy with the weight of imminent storm. The man raised his rifle, voice a low growl threaded with resolve. If they come for him, they come for me. No turning back. The Apache shifted, blade gleaming faintly, lips tight, but voice steady. Hatred runs deep, but so does the fire inside us. We meet the storm or be swallowed whole. A howl shredded the night, raw and agonized, echoing from the far canyons, a mournful herald riding the rising wind. The man's heart clenched, beat hammering against ribs like a frantic drum. Movement stirred in the mesquite, a flurry of dark figures creeping close, scouts sliding like ghosts beneath the brittle moonlight. The fragile refuge was breached. The hunt was no longer hunting shadows. The warrior knelt beside the dwindling fire, fingers tracing ancient marks into the dust, a silent prayer woven from the bones of battles long past. The man lowered himself beside him, muscles taut like drawn sinews. "Mercy is a fragile flame out here," the warrior murmured, eyes glowing like embers against gloom. "One wrong breath, and it snuffs out, leaving only ashes. "But flames can blaze," the man whispered back, voice shadowed with bitter hope. "Brightest in the darkest night." The gate shook violently under the assault of relentless blows. Splinters flew, the old wood splintering like brittle bones. Each strike sounded a dirge for fragile peace. "Hold fast," the man barked, lifting rifle with shaking hands. "Every inch they want, they'll pay in blood." A voice slithered out from the shadows, venom thick in its cold edge. "Your kindness is a wound we'll cut out with fire." The Apache's gaze flashed with molten steel, the ghost of lost kin shining in his eyes. "Then let our ashes mark the tale of those who never bowed." From near a shattered fence post emerged a figure cloaked in dust and dusk, carrying something wrapped tight, a secret sealed with desperation. The man's pulse stuttered as those whispered words brushed the crackling fire. "Not all the enemy rides with guns. Some wear the faces of friends." Before the man could respond, a rifle's stark crack shattered the night, a death knell piercing the fragile silence. The warrior's dagger flicked up, sharp and unwavering. Darkness gathered thick as a shroud, swallowing the farmstead whole. And then a slow, deliberate footstep advanced from the shadowed edge. Not enemy, not friend, but burdened with betrayal's cold breath. Eyes met with flame and frost, and a voice hissed, bitter and familiar. "You never heard the truth whispered in the dust. Not all foes draw iron from their holsters. Some carry knives hidden beneath brotherly smiles." The fragile alliance trembled on a blade's edge, trust unraveling like thread caught in desert thorns. Then the darkest shadow stepped fully into ran ice as the final words fell. "We've been betrayed from within. The enemy rides not only with guns, but with the faces of those we called brother." The night swallowed his gasp, and behind them, faint but unmistakable, the softest footfall, closing in like silence itself, heralded the coming nightmare. The gate shuddered beneath the weight of relentless blows, splinters flying like shards of broken dreams. Inside, the man's grip on the rifle was iron, his breath shallow yet steady, muscles tensed for the inevitable. Beside him, the Apache warrior stood resolute, eyes burning with quiet fire, blade drawn and ready. The night held its breath, a fragile heartbeat suspended before the storm. The shadowed figure who had slipped inside, the bearer of the desperate warning, now knelt on the dry earth, eyes flickering with fear and sorrow. "They ride faster than the wind," he whispered, voice ragged. "The traitor among them leads their hunt. The enemy closes not just from without, but from within." The man exchanged a long glance with the warrior, the weight of betrayal settling between them like a stone, crushing fragile hope. Trust, already scarce in these barren lands, now fractured deeper than any wound the patrol's arrows could inflict. "We face more than gunfire," the Apache said low, finger tracing ancient symbols in the dust, a silent prayer to the earth and ancestors. "The shadow within is a poison that seeps through bone and blood. We must watch those who claim brotherhood with more suspicion than the enemy's steel." A chill wind swept through the clearing, stirring embers and loose dust, carrying voices from the approaching riders. Like the mournful wail of a distant wolf, The first horse hooves thundered against brittle earth, echoing like relentless drums of war. "We hold this ground together," the man said, voice thick with resolve. "For him, for me, for every lost soul who claimed these unforgiving lands as home. We will not break." The Apache's nod was slow but unwavering. "Their hatred is deep, but so is the fire within us. We stand and fight, or we fall and feed the dust." The pounding at the gate intensified, a brutal chorus of wood and iron. The man stepped forward, rifle raised, as the first decisive blow splintered the barrier. A crack sharp as breaking bones. "Hold fast," he called through a voice steadied by years of hardship and hardened by desperation. "We give no ground, no quarter. For every inch, they'll pay with blood." The patrol leader's harsh voice cut through the chaos, seething with scorn. "Your mercy is a folly that will be your undoing. This land belongs to the strong, the ruthless. Give up or be crushed." The Apache advanced into the firelight, stones of scars and years gleaming with fierce dignity. "Mercy is strength," he replied, voice iron beneath worn skin, "and we carry it as a torch against your darkness." Gunfire cracked the night, silver arcs of death slicing through air thick with smoke and grit. Each volley answered by defiant cries, the desperate thrum of survival. Shadows danced violently, bodies pressed tight against splintered wood and each other, bound by a will that neither hatred nor fear could undo. Suddenly, a cry rang out, a piercing, shattering shout, and the figure who had warned them stumbled, clutching his side, blood dark and slick against dust-streaked hands. The man rushed to support him, swallowing a roar of rage and helplessness. "Stay with us," he urged, voice trembling but steady. "We've come too far to lose now." Amid the chaos, the Apache spotted movement near the edge of the firelight. A figure cloaked in dusk, face twisted by fear and betrayal. The whispered warning echoed in his mind. Not all the enemy rides with guns. Some wear the faces of friends. The traitor stepped forward, blade glinting in the firelight, eyes cold and merciless. "Your kindness is a wound I will cut deep," the voice hissed. "The desert will claim you all." With a swift motion, the warrior parried the strike, countering with honed precision. The dance of blades sharp and deadly. The man joined the fray, rifle raised, firing into the gathering dark, each shot a promise, no surrender. Minutes stretched, a furious storm of fury and desperation, until at last the relentless assault waned, the battered gate hanging by splinters, bodies strewn like shadowed memories beneath the flickering firelight. With heavy breaths and trembling limbs, the man and the warrior stood among the ruin, eyes fierce, but hearts beating steady. "This land remembers," the Apache murmured, voice raw but proud. "Those who dared to stand, to fight for more than survival. We are its keepers now." The man lowered his rifle slowly, exhaling the sharp sting of battle, a fragile piece settling like dawn's first light over scorched earth. "Neighbors may never understand," he said quietly, "but here, between dust and sky, we found something worth the fight, a bond beyond blood, a hope that outlives hatred." The first pale rays of dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the ragged silhouettes in gold and rose. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and smoke, mingling with the quiet heartbeat of life renewed. Around the shattered fence, sprouts of green pushed stubbornly through cracked soil, a testament to resilience in a land that demanded sacrifice and courage. The man reached out, steadying the warrior's weary frame. We survived the night, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as brothers. A faint smile broke across the warrior's weathered face, a rare light shining through years of hardship and loss. "We endure," he said simply, "and the land endures with us." Together, they raised their faces to the rising sun, silent witnesses to a dawn born from fire and blood, where mercy was carved not with softness, but with the fierce strength of two souls bound against a harsh world. The desert whispered around them, a timeless witness to the fragile alliances forged in its merciless heart. And as the light climbed higher, the man and the Apache warrior knew this was not an ending, but a beginning. The hate that sought to divide them had been met and broken. What remained was a thread of hope, woven tight beneath the endless sky, a legacy neither bullet nor betrayal could ever sever. In that boundless dawn, amid scorched earth and whispered promises, the story found its peace. The frontier breathed with the steadfast pulse of survivors, each heartbeat a testament to the courage of mercy amidst the wild lands.